Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. We're starting today's Global Design Forum. We are really pleased to have you here and to start the day off with fantastic speaker Chantelle Nicholson, who's going to speak to us about circular food practices and her own restaurant Apricity. But I'm not going to do a full introduction because we also have Sarah Gillespie from SAP who's going to come and introduce the session for us. And we're really very grateful to have you both here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the V&A. My name is Sarah Gillespie, and I'm part of the circular economy team at SAP. For anyone unfamiliar with SAP, we are a tech company, but in my case, I work on helping customers run sustainably, specifically on the circular economy. SAP is delighted to welcome you all back to the Circular Design Series. For the past 5 years, in collaboration with the Global Design Forum, we've been working with you, the world's designers, on a really important mission to create sustainable products and offerings which are circular by design. The circular economy, for anyone unfamiliar, is based on 3 principles led by design: eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials at their highest value, and regenerate nature. Our focus today is on the future of food and the food industry as a whole. Some statistics to begin, just to set the scene for why this is really important. Global food systems today account for 30% of emissions, and a third of all food produced is either lost or wasted. So it's a huge opportunity for change. Almost half of the habitable land in the world today is used in the production of food, and 71% of that could be reduced if we adopted circular measures. So if we change the way that we produce food. In terms of diversity, 60% of the world's calories today come from just 4 crops. A nature-positive food system requires a diverse mix of plants, livestock, and a better understanding of local context to function effectively. What happens on these farms determines our biodiversity, climate, and the future health of us as humans as well. As we collectively seek to shift from the current linear model to a circular model, we all have a role to play, whether as consumers, producers, or designers. No one can do it alone, and inspiration can be found everywhere. As businesses, we have to listen to designers and artists, many of whom will be in the room also today. I am really excited for our keynote speaker today, who is going to show us what a circular food system can look like. She is someone who understands both sides of the coin, from business and the art of food. She is someone who will inspire us all, whether we come from business, from art, or from culture, to think innovatively and creatively about the future of food. I'm delighted to be joined by Chantelle Nicholson. Chantelle is a multi-award-winning chef, restaurateur, author, and advocate. She champions seasonality, circularity, and founded the regenerative restaurant Apricity last year, and has already gained a Michelin Green Star. Originally from New Zealand, Chantelle is a trained lawyer, an independent board member for ReLondon, ambassador for chefs in schools, and a member of City Harvest's Food Council. Chantelle, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Welcome, and it's really lovely to be invited to obviously speak at the Design Forum and also talk about food and that as well. But first of all, I'm going to start off with the design aspect, because I think that's probably what most of you are kind of familiar with. So this, as you can see behind me, is the restaurant. So I just wanted to point out kind of a few key features of the restaurant and the design principles, really. So it was designed by, in collaboration with a company called Object Space Place, and with circular principles in mind. And that also one of those big points that I'll come on to, which sometimes gets forgotten when we talk about circular economy, is people and the people side of it. And especially in hospitality, we're not known for being wonderfully people-centric. So that was one of the things that I really wanted to kind of change up with Apricity. So the design features that you can kind of see, just to give you a brief overview, the chairs that you can see in that photo, you probably recognize them. They're quite a famous chair, but actually I bought them from a previous restaurant that closed called Tramshed, which some of you may have been to that used to be in Shoreditch, and they're actually made from recycled Coke bottles. So in my estimation, they're kind of on their third or fourth life with me, which is great. The tables were also from that restaurant. The lampshades you can see are made from oyster shells. We've got mycelium acoustic panels, which are kind of just tucked away in the ceiling there. And the kind of Jenga wall that you can see to my right, your left, I think, was actually the old staircase that we had to take out. And therefore, to be able to repurpose it, it was chopped up by a very patient builder to create a feature wall. So the kind of principles behind the design were that we kind of use as much as possible that was stripped out. So the skirting boards were used to clad the bar downstairs. The staircase was used to create a new wall. And we also looked at kind of the flow. There's actually functioning windows in the restaurant too, which is quite an unusual thing for a restaurant. So it's great when it's a bit cooler outside and it's not quite, or a bit warmer outside, sorry, and it's not quite, we don't quite need to put the aircon on. From a circular principle, obviously, we're using a lot less electricity, and we're just using natural resources to their best, really. And coming onto that principle is the notion of people that we discussed kind of briefly before today. And I think for me, there's a number of principles that I adopted into the restaurant, which were a bit probably potentially controversial, but I felt for me to be able to actually make an impact, these were things that I had the opportunity to try. So one of them, which Sarah referenced before, is that we have an 11 p.m. curfew, so we actually ask guests to leave by 11 p.m. so that the team can actually take public transport home or get home at a reasonable time before they then start their next working day. In my previous kind of life as a chef, it was very much a kind of, we'd kind of finish around 1 or 2 a.m. and be back in the kitchen by 7, so not the most circular way of being able to kind of be at your best. And we only open 5 days a week so that every team member can have 2 days off together, which is what the rest of the world generally functions at, but for hospitality it's not the norm. So that was very much how we kind of created the space. Coming on to one of, I guess, the most important things in any restaurant, or for me in particular, is the kitchen. And again, that was looked at from a perspective of how can we decrease the amount of energy, and also the negative, or increase renewables. So it's just electric. There was gas into it, but I kind of refused to be able to actually even use that. And we also employ kind of lots of energy saving techniques. So because we're closed for 2 days a week, we turn everything off in the restaurant that we can. So we have our kitchen that we kind of operate for each service, and then we have a big walk-in fridge. So what we do on a Saturday night is take everything out of those fridges that are in the kitchen, turn them all off, and put them into the walk-in, which is running anyway. So we're kind of being able to, I guess, in terms of actually we're not wasting any energy, and also we're saving money at the end of the day, which for a business is really important to be able to survive in this current climate in particular. So there's lots of factors onto that. Then coming on to food, which obviously is, as Sarah referenced, is a third of all food in the world is wasted, and that's either kind of at farm loss or actually food that is edible. So the Food Flagship initiative, which we are one of the flagship projects for London, so it's a partnership between the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who most of you are probably familiar with. Their kind of main function is to look at the circular economy. ReLondon, which is it's a London-based organisation that's looking to move London towards a circular economy. And then the Mayor of London, who also ensures that obviously what we do in London is trying to, again, looking at how we can to move towards more of a circular notion. So in terms of this flagship initiative, there's 3 cities that are part of this, and obviously London, very lucky to be one of them. And there's 3 pillars of action, because I think from my perspective too, sometimes there's a lot of talk about what we should be doing, but not necessarily how we do it. And I think this is a really nice, concise way of kind of defining what those pillars are. So obviously pillar 1 is that food is grown using agroecological processes and locally where possible. Pillar 2 is healthy and sustainable food items, and that menus healthy and sustainable food is prevalent in menus, and the third one being about waste, and obviously trying to eliminate waste, which is one of the principles of the circular economy. So eliminating it at the first instance, or actually being able to, repurpose, which I like to think of the principles of circular economy being kind of reuse, repurpose, refill, and the very, very last, right at the bottom, is recycling, which is obviously when there's no other way. So just talking more about how we action these three pillars at the restaurant. So pillar one is talking about, so these are a number of our suppliers, which all have some kind of weird and wacky names. Actually, to see them all at once is quite interesting. So the first one I'm going to talk about is called Shrub. So this was set up by two guys, and I think it was actually just before the first lockdown. And what they do is they work with small biodynamic or positive agroecological farms in Kent and East Sussex, and they're kind of the middlemen. So they take the produce and deliver it into restaurants. So for us, it's been an opportunity to actually get kind of local produce as possible, being in central London. And what they do is they also work from, instead of it being a linear relationship where it's supply and demand, we get a list of what's available, and then we can order from that list, rather than saying, actually, I want mangoes and pineapples and carrots, and it's actually, look, this is what's available this week. So again, I like to talk about the circular relationship that we have with all of our suppliers, and that we also try and work on what they have and what we can use to help them out. From our meat, of which is quite a small portion of our menu, we kind of try and hero the things that aren't the common, the usual suspects. So we generally have some offal on the menu, so some ox tongue, also looking at kind of cuts of meat that aren't the most popular. So lamb breast is one of them, which is also one of my favourite cuts. So kind of championing these things that we're helping out our suppliers to be able to ensure that their business can keep going, and that they can also eliminate waste. The second one, Crate to Plate. So they are a vertical hydroponic farm. Well, they've got a number of different models, but we have this lettuce on our menu, which actually I'm just going to sneak forward and show you. So the right-hand side, so that's just a baby lettuce head that has been grown vertically using hydroponics, so 90% less water than traditional farming. And obviously from a soil health perspective and talking about regenerative agriculture, it's kind of potentially slightly on the edge, but if we're looking at how we feed the world moving forward, I think we need to look at all players in this market. So for us, it's also great. It's delivered to us in reusable crates in an electric vehicle, so it's kind of all the things that tick the boxes. Then moving back, Merit mushrooms, so our mushroom grower. I didn't actually realise this until a couple of years ago, but a lot of mushrooms traditionally are grown using peat, and obviously extracting that peat is a great carbon sink and a great kind of carbon absorber. So to remove that from its natural situ is not a good thing. So this company doesn't use any peat in the growing of the mushrooms, and they kind of use all sorts of weird and wonderful things for their substrates. Again, delivered to us in crates, reusable crates, so that there's no minimal packaging. And the final one that I just wanted to talk about was Hod Me Dods, which has a very cool name.
This name is incredible.
I know. They're a great, one of my kind of favourite suppliers that I've been using for probably about 5 or 6 years, if not longer. And they're a British grain and pulse and seed supplier. So again, they're a bit of a kind of logistics in some way so they work directly with farmers who grow pulses, grains and seeds in the UK. Which is not that usual. So also looking at ancient grains that have a kind of fallen out of love, but actually are a much better decision to eat, or a much better product to eat than, say, rice, which has a huge amount of, a myriad of kind of tricky challenges with it. So Hold Me Dods grow things like spelt, different types of grain, barleys, and work with the farmers to really find out the best way of growing them. Also lots of pulses and things like fava beans, which are fantastic nitrogen fixers, create great biodiversity, crop rotation. So again, doing really great things. And they have just become, they've mostly been wholesale, but they're now readily available in all Holland and Barrett stores. This is not an ad, but it's just, I think it's great that they're now kind of on the high street and available to buy. So definitely worth checking out. So that's kind of talking more about suppliers. So again, trying to be as local as possible and trying to work with similar suppliers that share our ethos really of circularity, from packaging to deliveries to actual, even in the way they also treat their teams, and looking at that kind of bigger picture stuff. So pillar 2, which is very much about kind of healthy and sustainable diets, which again, probably a lot of restaurants aren't known for, but we've kind of been really looking at how we, what we put into the food. And obviously ultra-processed foods are not something that are particularly common in my kitchen, but again, just looking at how can we support our guests, consumers, to actually be eating a diet that's a bit more varied, also has more fibre, because as we know, not many of us actually get the right amount of fibre. So we're looking at swapping out a lot of kind of white flour to whole wheat. We always have a lot of pulses on the menu now from Homie Dodds. So again, just really looking at how we can kind of hero those sorts of things. Linseeds, which are also one of my kind of new discoveries, which have an amazing amount of fibre, protein and really healthy fats. And marrow fat peas as well, which most of you probably know as mushy peas, but if you can buy marrow fat peas now, the Homie Dodds ones in a can in Holland and Barrett, and obviously they don't have the same kind of green food colouring, etc., that some of the other brands have, and they are just delicious. Kind of that just blitzed up, kind of creates an avocado-like texture of a puree. So definitely one of my go-tos. And then also looking at kind of, I think menu design is a really key one for how people eat, and quite often in restaurants. Bread is one that I always felt a bit conflicted about, that, you go into a restaurant and you just get given bread on the table. For me, I actually want, in order to minimize waste and in order to kind of hero the great bakers and makers that we work with, we actually put a charge on for the bread, because then it means that people will order that bread if they want it. It generally won't be wasted, and it allows us to kind of talk more about what we do and why we do it. And then also we, just in terms of set menu, so quite often, a 3-course menu that you can go into a restaurant and have. For our lunch offer, I decided to actually just stick with a 2-course, because I found that, if something is on the menu for free, people will have it. And if that happens to be a dessert or a pudding or something that's probably not, you don't necessarily need it as such, then it's there as an added extra, or you could share a pudding between 2 of you. So from a health perspective, I made the conscious decision to just have a 2-course menu that then you can add the extras on if you wish. And then plant-based options, again, I don't advocate that we should be fully plant-based, because I think animals play a really important part in the food system. But I will definitely agree that we need to eat more plants. So for us, it's very much about how can we hero those plants, make them delicious, make them really tasty, and kind of have a very plant-forward menu that kind of, again, celebrates local produce, and takes all of these pillars into account. And then talking about pillar 3, which is obviously minimising waste. Again, as I talked to about our suppliers that we work with and trying to kind of take things off them that potentially would have gone to waste. But also really looking at a kind of motto of anything we can eat doesn't go in the bin. And things that traditionally perhaps weren't necessarily eaten, we kind of look at ways that we can create that happening. So again, I'm just going to move on to the next slide. So the scallop dish that you'll see on your left, yes, this is quite confusing. So the roe of the scallop, which is not often used in a lot of restaurants, we have found ways to kind of use that. So one of them, we coined a phrase called scallopalata. So instead of taramasalata, we have scallopalata using scallop roe. So we cure and smoke the roes and then turn them into kind of an emulsion that we serve with our scallops. And the skirt of the scallop, so you've probably never, unless you've opened scallops yourselves before, there's what's called the skirt around the muscle of the scallop. And again, that's something that's typically just kind of thrown in the bin. So we found ways, this particular dish, we created a sauce out of it, so you've got all that richness, but we've also dried them, crisped them up, and turned them into, being able to actually be edible. And coming on to drinks and cocktails, for us, again, kind of working with low intervention wine producers, so ones that, again, kind of look at to really respect the land that they work with, and also the process where there's kind of as little intervention as possible, so as little kind of, whether it's filtration or whether it's actual additives to the wine, these are very much low intervention wines, but also cocktails in the restaurant. So as you'll notice, that's quite a sparse looking glass, so we don't have any garnishes on any of our drinks, just because from my perspective too, that's an element where there's a lot of waste. I think I remember reading something last year that one of the big brands, they used to put half a passion fruit on top of their cocktails, and they just overnight stopped doing that, and not only did it save them a huge amount of money, it also saved a huge amount of food waste. So also from the cocktail front, we also use as much as we can from the kitchen. So we don't really buy anything in for our cocktails apart from the actual spirits. So we use things like, if we've got poaching liquor, if we've poached some peaches for a dessert, then we'll look at using that liquid to then create something delicious. Peach stones, plum stones, apple cores, apple skins. We do quite a bit of foraging as well, so any of that kind of is used to create. So the whole system in itself is very much circular in its fashion from kind of what we buy in. We also, one of the big things that I was not quite sure how it would go down when we opened, but I think COVID definitely brought forward the resurgence of the QR code, as we'll all probably agree. And so for me, having menus on QR codes was just a bit of a lifesaver. And originally it was so I didn't want the waste of the paper, but what we've actually found since having the restaurant up and running is that the amount of time that saves us. I think we've all probably had experience of fighting with printers and them not doing what we think they're going to do. And because we change our menu frequently, it also, in the principles of the circular economy, so making sure we don't waste things, it's just saved us so much time. And for me, that's our biggest asset, and that's our biggest cost, it's our biggest resource is people and time. So in a circular function, it's really done its job. And I think one of the big things too, that, if we have 2 portions of something left, we can keep them on the menu and then just quickly, with the touch of a button, remove them, so that again, that whole principle of kind of not getting into the waste is really, really key to that. And I think in restaurants too, there's very much can be a kind of a notion of, because things have to be quite quick, kind of looking at how you can speed things up. And I think this is one that actually really does, it from a circular fashion, rather than thinking, let's look at disposables versus things that you wash. So very much, everything we do kind of aligned in these principles. So I think I know we're very tight on time, but that's probably my...
Amazing.
Yeah, the kind of, in a bit of a speedy nutshell.
Thank you. I think you've articulated circularity really, really well. And I love everything that you've done in your restaurant. I also went by it yesterday. It looks incredible. So everyone, please go visit. Everything looked and smelled amazing. What I really love is that in your version of circularity and your vision, it includes people. And you've mentioned that a lot. And I think that's something that's easily forgotten. And especially how you've purchased everything secondhand as far as you could in the restaurant as well. Again, it's such a great example of how you can start from the beginning and design the right way the whole way through. I don't know, I think we have time for maybe one question. So what can we do as Londoners? How can we play a role? How can we support you and support these businesses? And what can we be doing differently to move to this new future?
I think from my perspective, it's, I do get asked this question a lot, and I think it's just being really conscious of the decisions that you make. And that decision could be where you eat, it could be what you eat, it could be how you eat it, it could be what you buy it in, it could be that cup of coffee that you don't take your disposable cup, that you take a disposable cup rather than having your, your reusable water bottle and your keep cup in your bag. I mean, I think for me, circular economy and the principles of it, it's actually distilled down to one kind of ideology, which is common sense. I think it's common sense that we don't use things that just get thrown away. It's common sense that we try and repair things rather than replace. It's common sense that what we put into our bodies is probably, as good as it can be 90% of the time. And it's common sense that we, are more conscious about how we make those decisions, what goes in the bin, what doesn't, and really choosing to value each product, whether it's an ingredient, whether it's a plate of food, whether it's a service that someone offers you, and just thinking about eliminating waste from that. And just really remembering of how many people were involved in that process of what you've got. Again, whether it's on your plate, whether it's in your fridge, there's so many people that are involved in processes. It's almost, I guess, respecting their work and their time and their love that's gone into it by valuing what it's given you at the end of the day.
Amazing, thank you. I see we're at time, so you should leave. There's one book that we discussed before that we've both read, which is called Ravenous. It's by Henry Dimbleby. We are not sponsored, but if you want to learn more about food and the impact on both human health and the environment, it's based in the UK. It's looking at, he wrote the UK food strategy. I loved it. I've learned so much from it.
It's an incredible book, and it's really just tells you, again, kind of all the factors that are at play, but also about what potential solutions are, which I like, because it's not just doomsday, it's like there are actually solutions to this, which is also, helpful.
Yeah, definitely the message that we need. So we all have a role to play in moving to this future of food. Go do some research, visit Apricity. Thank you so much, this is amazing. I can't wait for every restaurant in London to be following the same process that you have here and the same principles. And I hope that you are sharing that message wide and far.
Thank you. Well, platforms like this are helpful, so thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much.